The man we remember as Phil Lynott was born into a world that didn't quite know what to do with him. His mother, Philomena Lynott, was a young woman from Dublin, fiery, independent, and searching for something more. In 1948, in the working-class heart of Birmingham, she met Cecil Paris, a handsome, well-dressed man from Georgetown, British Guiana, who had crossed an ocean to find work and a future in post-war Britain. Their connection was brief but real. And when Phil was born in West Bromwich in 1949, a beautiful brown-skinned boy, it sent shockwaves through Philomena's white Irish Catholic family. They didn't know how to raise a mixed-race child in a world that only understood black and white, so they sent him home to Dublin, to be raised by his grandparents. And that's where the legend begins. School was never easy at first. Phil's skin color made him a target in classrooms where difference wasn't just unusual, it was unwanted. He and his friends had to fight, quite literally, to earn their place. There were bullies, cruel jokes, and confrontations, but Phil didn't back down. After a few sharp altercations, and a bloody nose or two, he was respected. Even then, there was something magnetic about him. A confidence that couldn't be shaken. He adjusted fast, learned the rhythm of the streets, and carved out his space in a city still catching up to the changing world. But while Dublin was narrow in some ways, Phil's imagination was wide open. Across the Atlantic, he found a lifeline, the sound of Motown, the soul of Marvin Gaye, the harmony of the Mamas and the Papas. Through radio static and imported records, he absorbed the swagger, the vulnerability, the rhythm and blues of Black America. This passion for music led him to begin writing, and he teamed up with schoolmate Brian Downey, a drummer with real finesse, and soon they joined a band named the Black Eagles. They played covers at first: soul, R&B, American rock and roll. By the late 60s, the Black Eagles had run their course. But Dublin's music scene was small, and fate was always just one pint away. In a pub on the north side of the city, Eric Rickson bumped into Eric Bell. Over drinks, they started talking about starting something new, something bigger, louder, more original. The idea sparked, and soon after, they reached out to Phil and Brian. Just like that, in 1969, Thin Lizzy was born. Their first major breakthrough came in 1973 with a track they almost didn't want to record, a rocked-up version of the Irish folk ballad, Whiskey in the Jar. But once it hit the airwaves, everything changed. Suddenly, Thin Lizzy wasn't just a local band, they were international. But it wasn't a fluke. Over the next few years, they honed a sound that would define hard rock for a generation. The twin lead guitar attack, harmonized, sharp, and soaring, fused with Lynot's streetwise lyricism. Tales of outlaws, lovers, fighters, and dreamers, told with the swagger of someone who'd lived it. Albums like Jailbreak, Bad Reputation, and Live and Dangerous cemented their place in rock history. They weren't just making records, they were creating anthems. The Boys Are Back in Town, Dancing in the Moonlight. These weren't just hits. They were declarations. Soundtracks for the restless and the romantic. But Phil Lynott was never just the rock god with the leather jacket and the bass slung low. Behind the stage lights and swagger was a mind always reaching, into books, into myths, into himself. He pulled from Irish folklore and classic literature, mixing ancient heroes with street kids and outlaws. His lyrics painted Dublin like a modern epic, part James Joyce, part Chuck Berry. And it wasn't just bluster. Phil was a true poet. In 1974, he published a collection of his lyrics and poems titled Songs for While I'm Away, a glimpse into a soul both sharp and tender. But for all the confidence he projected, fame brought pressure. As a mixed-race man in the public eye, Phil carried the weight of representation, in a country that still didn't know what to make of a black Irish rock star. He wrestled with identity, with expectations of masculinity, and with the loneliness that fame can't fix. He found refuge in collaboration. His longtime friend Gary Moore became a creative anchor. Together, they produced some of Phil's most emotional and raw work. And even as Thin Lizzy roared through the charts, Phil began carving out his solo path. More experimental, more personal, still unmistakably his. Away from the spotlight, a different Phil emerged. In 1980, he married Caroline Crowther, daughter of British comedian Leslie Crowther. They had 2 daughters together, Sarah and Kathleen. He even wrote a song for Sarah, naming her in the chorus, like a lullaby made of electric strings. But the demands of the road, the pressures of the industry, and the inner battles he rarely spoke of, they all took their toll. Phil Lynott was a man split between personas. The poet and the performer, the father and the frontman, the rebel and the romantic. The pressures of fame, identity, and expectation, all the weight he'd carried for so long began to show, and he began using drugs as an escape. Behind the leather and the defiance was a man quietly unraveling. On January 4, 1986, Phil Lynott died in a Salisbury hospital. He was just 36 years old. Gone far too soon, but somehow, his death felt like the final note in a song we already knew by heart. Tragic. Heroic. Almost mythic. In 2005, a bronze statue of Phil Lynott was unveiled just off Grafton Street in Dublin, not far from where he used to roam. It doesn't just mark where he stood. It marks where he still stands in the hearts of fans. Documentaries, reissues, tribute concerts, they've all kept his memory alive. But more than anything, it's the music that speaks. The songs still play. The boys are always back in town. Phil Lynott sang of rebels, lovers, drifters, and dreamers. And in the end, he was all of them. A voice like no other. A life like no other. And a legacy that refuses to fade. Thanks for watching another Fresh K documentary, where we bring the legends back into the light. If Phil Lynott's story moved you, inspired you, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. We've got more untold stories, deep dives, and cultural icons coming soon. And trust us, you won't want to miss what's next.